Yeah. All right, welcome everybody to today's session, a workshop from Karen Rawdon, the second. First one was last month. Mostly, I didn't attend last month's workshop, but I did listen to it yesterday, watched it yesterday. Thank you. That was a very inspiring workshop that you gave us last month, Karen. So I'm the secretary of Panza, and there. Do I need to go on with your credentials again, Karen? Would you like that, or would you like to just continue on from here?
Well, hopefully everyone has either
Yeah,
attended or listened. If they
great.
haven't, I don't
Um,
need to do anymore
yeah,
about.
okay, that's great. Um, so um, the framework that you were working with last month, I thought was really wonderful. The different and not less framework that you started around holding space in the room. Just to recap slightly what you were doing last month and your room exercise, which was very powerful and feels very apt at the moment for those that aren't in Auckland. There's very stormy weather going on at the moment, and it's very noisy and chaotic outside. And while I watched yesterday, while I watched last month's um, workshop, it was stormy and chaotic, and it just made it very embodied and very experiential way of going through your workshop. And yeah, we it does feel very apt to continue this month's workshop with you um, in this environment at the moment. And if anyone disappears suddenly, and it may be why there's a little bit less in attendance, because I know there's a lot of power out in Auckland at the moment. So for those that aren't in Auckland or Northland, um, so yeah, hopefully we'll all be able to stay with you today. But yeah, we're very excited and looking forward to it. And welcome, Karen, and welcome everybody else. And I'll hand it over to you now.
That's great. Thank you, Tanya. That's wonderful. And yeah, it's wonderful to be here. Wonderful to see you all. I really appreciated just sitting in silence as everyone was coming in, just to breathe together. Um, so let's begin with a reflection, with meditation. On this evening, I think it's very windy where some of you are, very quiet and bright here. So let's connect together in meditation. So when you're ready, get yourself comfortable, feet on the floor, and when you're ready, just allow your eyes to gently lower or close. And just begin with a couple of nice deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. Bringing your energy home to within you. Landing in your space and checking in with your body, of what it's like to be in your body in this moment. Bring your attention to your being in your body. And recognizing I have this body, this incredible body, carries me through the world. It is the vehicle of my being in the world. And I have this body, but I am not my body. I am more than my body. And allow your attention to drift away from your body and become aware of your emotions, your feelings. Not getting too engaged in them, just noticing, quietly naming. Just allow yourself to be with the being of your emotions. And affirming to yourself, I have these emotions, these feelings. They bring color to my world. They connect me to the past. They connect me to my hopes, my dreams for the future. And to the experience of the present moment. I have this vast myriad of emotions, but I am not my emotions. I have these emotions, but I am more than my emotions. And then allow your attention to drift away from your emotions and become aware of the experience of your being in your mind. Not getting too engaged, creating a little separation between the eye of the storm that's calm and the storm that sometimes feels like the mind. The brainstorm, the ideas, the meaning making, the pattern finding. Just become aware of what you're with in this moment. And you can affirm to yourself, if you're willing, have this mind, this brilliant, engaged, always working mind. These thoughts and these perceptions, they help me to make meaning of my world. They help me to create decisions. But I am not my mind, and I am not my thoughts, because I am more than my mind and my thoughts. And then allow your attention to drift away from your mind and your thoughts. Let them go as you drop down into a place that's quieter, calmer, and more still. A place of self where you are most essentially you. And open to that space. Place of calm. A place of peace. And a place of openness and containment, of being held and of being free. And from this place, imagine, if you will, that you are on the most beautiful beach. It is the beach of belonging, and it is a place where you feel most centered and warm and safe. It is of your making. So in your imagination, create around you what you need. Notice what you need to have on your feet to make it more comfortable. Do you like the sand, or would you prefer some form of shoe or some form of container for your feet so you don't have the sand in between your toes? Notice what temperature you would like this beach to be. Notice if you would like a breeze or no breeze. And choose to make it how you need it. And maybe walk down to the water's edge, or as close as you would like to get. And with your breath, as you breathe out, notice that the waves go out a little bit. And as you breathe in, the waves come in a little bit. Even if it's just noticing a short, small amount of the tide, maybe a meter, maybe a beach, just with your breath, control the waves. Noticing how the sound of your breathing is like the waves on a calm day. And feel yourself being relaxed from this and nourished and nurtured from this environment. And when you're ready, going to begin to leave the beach, holding that sense of belonging, holding whatever quality you need to be here today. And begin to bring yourself back into your body, noticing the sounds outside of yourself. When you're ready, begin to bring yourself back into this space, wiggling toes or fingers, opening your eyes when you're ready, and just look around your room, just to bring yourself back into your space. Okay. Good morning. Good evening. Oh, the sun is coming up. I'm just going to change my blinds. Good evening, everyone. It is really wonderful to see you all, and thank you for joining us all on this evening. So we're going to begin with a recap and setting an intention of today, but just to bring yourself in, it would be lovely to hear your voices, just with a 1 or 2 or 3 word check-in, either about the meditation or where you are. So let's just begin with the meditation, actually, just with a check-in, 1 or 2 or 3 words, and then I'll invite you in a bit later on to share about this workshop. So who would like to begin? And actually, whoever begins, if you could invite the next person in, so just choose someone on your screen and invite them into this space. That would be great. Good morning, Kim. Good evening, Kim.
Good evening, Karen. Good evening, everyone. I'm sitting just in a very calm and centered peace. Thank you for the beautiful meditation. And I would like to invite Meg. Would you like to open? You'll need to unmute yourself, so my dear.
Thank you. Good morning, Meg. Good evening, Meg. Could you unmute? Okay, Jean. There we go.
Wouldn't unmute, and I'm doing very well. Lovely meditation, thank you. And yeah, just fortunately not great big winds here in Australia, just fairly nice. So I'll call on Dale.
Hi everyone, serene is my word, and I'll call on Surya Gita.
Thank you, Dale.
Kia ora, everyone, from Wellington, which isn't wild weather for a change. And I feel quite, very nourished by that meditation, and quite tired tonight after a day at work. And I'll call on Vaughan.
Thank you, Surya Gita. Good morning, Vaughan.
Yeah, I feel calmed and softened after that meditation. Thanks, Karen. And a little tired after the day. I'll call on Tanya.
Thank you. Hi, Tanya.
Thank you, Vaughan. I'm just settling, just starting to settle. Still a bit concerned about everything going on around, so just trying to be present.
Thank you, Tanya. Who would you like to invite?
I will call on Steph.
Thank you. Hi, Steph.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for that meditation, Karen. Yeah, I'm feeling very full, grateful, and a bit tired. So I'm going to try and be present. But I'm looking forward to this workshop. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Jerry, I call on Jerry.
Thanks, Steph. And thanks, Karen. That was great. Gosh, it's such a familiar meditation. You know, the body, feelings, mind, that I was drifting off, and then suddenly I'm on the beach, and what's going on? And it was lovely, really nice. I was in Fiji and didn't want to leave. It was really lovely. Thank you very much. Very good.
Thank you, Jerry. Who would you like to invite in?
So, Howard.
Thank you, Jerry. So my word is embodied, and a very balmy autumn afternoon in my part of Australia. And I'll invite Jean.
Thank you. I'm not sure if Jean can be on. She sent a message.
Oh,
Beautiful beginning, not able to speak at the moment. Okay, Jean.
Okay.
Okay,
I haven't been tracking, to be honest, but Leanne is.
Kia ora. My word is appreciative, and even though I also am quite tired, I also feel quite present. So I'm really grateful for the real softening of that meditation. It was really beautiful. I invite Mark.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm struggling to be present. I'm tired, and I can hear wind and rain around me quite a bit, but I am here. And I call on whoever's left. Or is that it?
No, we've got Hidai. How do you say your name? I don't want to say it incorrectly. Oh, but you're on mute.
Kia ora. My name is Hua. Because I'm using a work computer, so the name is not well said. It's just a kind of my surname's Dai, so it's HDAI. It's Hua Dai. I really enjoy that meditation. I really enjoy the beach, the warm beach, and did not want to leave, like Jerry said. And I am present, really grateful for that experience of embodying and also being present. Thank you. I look forward to tonight's session from you, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have everyone.
No, Daya.
Daya, can I invite you, Daya?
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Good morning, Karen. Good evening, everyone. Lovely to see everyone. Hi, Vaughan. Yeah, I was feeling tired. I almost wasn't going to get on today, I thought. I was feeling so tired, but really glad I've made it, and I am feeling much more present and feeling quite peaceful. So thank you for the beautiful meditation.
Thank you, Daya. Great. No, I think that is everyone apart from Jean. I know she's here. She's present. I really love that phrase. I am here. I am. We're here. So, and is there anyone else? We have got everyone. That's good. Great. Right, everybody. So, am I right in thinking that everyone has listened or was present at the last workshop? Okay, good stuff. All right. So we're just going to do a little bit of an intention for today and a recap. I'm going to do it slightly differently than last time. I know everyone's tired, so let's stay in this space and draw on each other's energy and our own energy from inside, and just see what you need today. So yeah, so this part of this workshop is very much on the practical guidance. We're really going to be looking at some of the models, looking at how to work with neurodivergence when it's in the room, how to take care of yourself. I've got a couple of case studies, but I'm also really excited, actually, if anyone would like to bring a case of their own to talk about, and we can explore that together. We're not going to do breakouts today. We're actually going to stay in the room and really bring ourselves into this space rather than be separate. So let's stay with the impulse towards wholeness, as Asa Jolie would say. So yes, I have got some PowerPoints, but I think because everyone's a bit tired and because they can take us a bit far away from being in this space, what we'll do is I've spoken to Jerry and we'll send them as some kind of takeaways for you. And then if you've got any questions, you can come back to me. So the first thing is that, that's our intention. The recap obviously is, but last time we looked at neurodiversity and neurodivergence. Just as a reminder, everyone is neurodiverse. When we think about neurodiversity, we're really thinking about the individual brains, the individual experience of being in the world. And everyone has a unique brain, a unique way that our brain works. And they're all different. And so there is no right way of thinking and learning and behaving, and differences are not viewed as deficits. They're just different and unique. Neurodivergence, when we're talking about neurodivergence, that describes brain variations in those with conditions including, but not limited to, autism, also known as ASD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, dyspraxia. Dyspraxia was once known as the clumsy child syndrome. Have you ever heard that one? But actually it encompasses so much more than that. It's around the way that brains process. It's a fascinating area, dyslexia, and much, much more. In the last session, I brought one of the slides up, and I had actually taken that list from a list of comorbidities, which is where some conditions come alongside neurodivergence. And it was really great that Mark brought that in, and I kind of prompted me to go back, because I was thinking, I'm not sure I agree with that list either. So yeah, I'll send out an amended list, but there's also a link to that paper as well, which I thought might be quite interesting for you as well. So, and then I really wanted to talk about intersectionality, because it describes the meeting within each person of all that makes their experience theirs. It's the unique amalgamation. It's our unique amalgamation of our history, culture, gender, biology, heritage, and much, much more. And one of my favorite quotes around working with neurodivergence, which isn't about psychosynthesis in one way, but it is completely about psychosynthesis in another, is ADHD is the intersection between neurology and spirituality. It's the nexus between science and meaning making. And that quote is actually from someone who runs, he's a PhD and runs all sorts of trainings on neurology. He's a neurologist basically, but when he said this, I just thought, oh my goodness, this is exactly our work. It is around that intersection of bringing in all that encompasses, all that is in the room when we're meeting with our clients. And it's not just who they are or where they come from or where their family is or where their history is or how many adverse childhood experiences they have. It's also about their inner workings of who they are in this world, how their brain is, how their brain had to adapt to survive and the yearning within each one of what they want when they come into this space in therapy with us or in coaching. They want to come home to themselves. It is a quest for self. And so I love this work, as you know. I'm going to go on to a bit of trauma in a minute. What we're not going to do, as I said, is breakout rooms. Oh gosh, we've got less than an hour. We've got 50 minutes or so. So let's see how far we get. We'll get through this. I want to go into trauma, but I also really want to hear some feedback from you, any questions that you have from the last workshop, anything that you've been with in this month in between. So if anyone would like to bring themselves in, please feel free to do so if you had anything they'd like to share.
Karen, I don't need it answered right now, but upon my exit last time, I put to you the question that I was hoping. I hope you didn't answer it after I had to go last time, but I'm hoping that we can get a perspective on it, some insights for me anyway, over the next hour, which is when you talk about ADHD, at least there can be the difficulties in attending for very long or concentrating, but there's also that hyper focus. So at the time I'd asked you, and if it's relevant and there's time, I'd love to have some insight on how those two sit together, because I can observe them in people I know that pretty much tick all the boxes for ADHD, whether they have a diagnosis or not. And I find it really interesting. So that would be my question for this evening. Yes.
Thank you, Meg. Really good to hear. Yes, I did answer it, but I also answered it in a very short way because I really wanted to bring that in as well around hypervigilance and well, you said hyperfocus, and I was just thinking about hypervigilance because somebody asked me the other day about hypervigilance and this kind of hyper experience, so either zoning out or hyper focusing. And we'll talk about that in brief. Actually, I often say that they're hyper focus and zoning out are kind of two sides of the same coin. You might see them as two sides of the dissociative coin. In order to focus, in order to be in many of you, I don't think you, Meg, but many people this evening are in the middle of a storm, and it's how to find that safe place within the storm. And with hyper focus, I talked about a subpersonality of mine called the fog. It's like this wonderful blanket of snow that comes in and basically will only allow me to see the small thing in front of me, whether it's cake decorating or, I think I used the analogy of finding a knot in a necklace and completely disregarding the fact that I had to leave for a train in 10 minutes, and there I was, sort of, this knot, I'm going to sort this knot out, and hyper focusing on that as a way of actually with psychosynthesis, we might see that as a sign, as a clue that I am at the edge of what is bearable for me. So the client that may go to hyper focus, it's a clue, it's a sign that something in the world has become too overwhelming. And so in order to focus in and direct attention, but of course that's what the personality will do. But of course, as we know from subpersonalities and part work, all of our subpersonalities, all of our parts, and if we think about the parts that might hold that hyper focus, that only have a very short range of perspective. So what I mean by that is they can't tell that I need to be leaving for a train. They just go, I know exactly what to do. This work, it's too much for you right now, so let's focus in. And then that sense of focusing in feels like a connection to self, because it is. It feels like a place of resourcing, a place of calm, a place of that is bearable. But of course, if we allow those sub-personalities or that part to take hold, then it actually takes us away from being in the world of how we need to be. And so actually finding another sub-personality, another part that can help to break out of that, can help us to, and I'm not saying you as the therapist can help your client to break out of that, but helping a client to identify and to kind of discover for themselves, is there another part of them that helps to break the cycle? I might share with you about one of my sub-personalities, who I call the Sergeant Major. And I often talk about him coming in his, glorious greens, and he is a nightmare, a total nightmare to be with if he's in charge. He's the one that doesn't allow for any sleep, believes that breaks and rest is for wimps, and so we'll stop, won't even think that actually it's lunchtime, or this person needs a drink, or this. So actually, when that's in charge, if you think about that kind of high energy, that it can be really destructive. However, when it's aligned to self, then, and we know when it's aligned to self. So for example, if someone is hyper focusing on something, there will be a moment in that hyper focus where there'll be a chink of light, a break in the kind of the focus to go, oh my goodness, I'm supposed to be catching a train. And that is the time that if we can help our clients to build respect and space for that pause, that moment, whereby suddenly the moment of clarity, then we can choose. I might choose I need to call on my sub-personality, Sergeant Major, to come in and break the cycle. He goes, right, okay, glass of water, let's do a list. Okay, and suddenly I'm out of that identification with the fog, and I'm in identification with myself, and I'm helping to bring in the energy of that other sub-personality that is like, okay, come on, let's get back to leave for a train. It's time to get the keys, put your shoes on, those kind of things. Yeah, does that tell you a little bit about working with hyperfocus? Yep. Zoning out is a very similar way. If you think about the fog, as well as zoning out, I've also hyper-focused on something else. Zoning out is a huge amount of work that we can do around that, and bringing that into the clinic space. If you notice that it happens, if you notice that zoning out happens, you'll know it, because there'll be you've probably experienced it, Meg. There'll be a drifting, whether it's a drifting of gaze, whether it's a pause or the slowing down in words. There's particular elements of zoning out that actually, even if you don't know it, ask your client, what's it like for you? Do you know when it happens? How? No, and get really curious, because when you're in the room with your client, you're both experts in this space. You're both collaborators in this journey. And this will be potentially very, very new for someone with neurodivergence who may have spent their life feeling wrong, trying to fit into a world that isn't really built for them, who's shamed. Yeah. So bringing them into this process and engaging them, asking them what it's like when they zone out, and how will we know that it happens together? How will we notice when it's happening in this space? And how will, why don't we look out for it and use it as a clue? What does that let us know? Maybe there was something that was just said that was too much, or maybe we need to pause for a drink. So everything can be part of the therapy. Yeah. Thank you, Meg.
I was wondering about. I wonder whether the two sides of the coin, the sort of dissociative, and then the hyperfix, the fixated. I have somebody who's now on with medication for ADHD, and I was very moved in your resources. There's quite a lot of information there about the high mortality rate for neurodivergent people. And it seemed like, a pattern that he has lived is unable to recover from various experience of dissociation. Does what he can, but if that resource is not available, for example, if a hug from a friend is not available, he can, in his overwhelm, so that's dissociation. He goes for what has worked in the past, which is a very narrow band, but very often it is available. And if it is not, the shame experience, the I am wrong in the world experience takes over, and there's been a history of very radical action. So it's like a switch that flicks, and then the hyperfixation is how might I do away with myself. So that you're speaking into that. So would that be, I guess I'm saying, might that be one expression of that double-sided coin? And I'm just continue to be working with him so that he is able to have a range of internal and external resources to help him at these pivot points. Because it is my experience that neurodivergent people can be very dangerous very quickly to themselves. Yeah, when there's not a lot of shades of grey.
Yeah.
Or there can be not a lot of shades of grey.
Yeah. Absolutely, Kim. Thank you. I'm aware really you're
question, more of a riff than one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get you. You're referring to something called the amygdala hijack, which is a bit of a jargon phrase, but it's really when that sense of desperation and that also the bag of tools. There's not enough tools in the bag to deal with this, to be able to kind of cope with this in between, this feeling of polarity from one extreme to another. But there is a pivot point. There is the space in between, and that can be the most important starting point of really finding that space in between. When we take an out breath and an in breath, there is a moment when we just pause in that breathing and then back out again. And it's much more important to get it with the body than it is with the head. The head is always the last to know. And when I'm working with a client that has that extreme experience, especially when there's suicide ideation, really finding that actually that there is self in the regression as well. There is self in that sense of I need to do this, but of course the personality understands it as something else. So rather than I want to I can't live anymore, it's more like I can't live like this anymore. Something has to change, and that's creating pause. Going on to medication comes with a lot of grief, a lot of reacclimating into the world, reconciling actually what was and what wasn't. But a huge amount of it is grief work. Huge amount of grief work. There's a book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow. This is not a neurodivergent book. The Wild Edge of Sorrow is about becoming an apprentice to grief. And to know that actually in having that sense of I don't want this anymore, although it can feel like a really negative place to be, it can be a starting point too of, okay, so where am I right now? Sometimes when someone is caught in that amygdala hijack, that sense of the polarity and not being able to ground, not being able to remember their kind of how they help themselves or what they might need, actually finding getting it written up, helping clients to work out their own menu of support, of what helps. Glass of water, turning on the radio, funnily enough, can have quite an impact because it's a different frequency. It's much better than actually having a podcast, which feels quite disconnected from the world. That can really bring someone out of what Pete Walker would talk about as a oh my gosh, emotional flashback. So if you look at, I'm talking about complex PTSD here. So if anyone, there's the book Complex PTSD by Pete Walker, and a lot of his work can be used and applied to neurodivergence, working with neurodivergence. He's got a really great kind of, I think it's like 14-step plan for working with emotional flashbacks, and when they happen, it's really difficult to come out of them because you get caught in it. If you think about being identified and being stuck in that space, being really disconnected from themselves and the world, actually sometimes even just saying, okay, I'm caught in this right now, even those words, when we're working with complex PTSD, we would talk about recognizing, oh, I'm having an anxiety attack. I'm having an emotional flashback. No one's brought up anxiety yet, but we might as well bring it in. Anxiety and depression, I think we talked about last time that there's secondary experiences of having a neurodivergence. With ASD in particular, can be a constant feeling of anxiety, an underlying feeling of anxiety all the time. When I work with anxiety, again, I see it as a clue and encourage my clients to really imagine that perhaps that's a message that something in this situation isn't quite right for us. Something in this situation isn't quite right for us. Maybe I've said yes when I needed to say no. Maybe I've said no when I needed to say not yet. Maybe I need 15 more minutes just to myself. Maybe I need to close the door or the window. So even creating just that slight shift into, okay, small stuff. The anxiety, this feeling just lets me know I'm at my edge. I'm at an edge and I need something to help me find some support. And so the best time to work on this with your client is in the calm spaces. In the moments in your sessions, you just get really curious and ask them, what's it really like? What helped in the past? What helps now? If we could find a list, what would be your top 5 if you were helping me to get through when I'm experiencing one of these? Turn it around. What would you say to somebody else? What would be, engage their self into the room, bring that I energy, that knowing, that calm. So,
great.
How are we doing? Thanks, Kim. Well, we're well on the way. How's this landing with everyone?
This is great, Karen. I'm enjoying it. I've been quite spoiled, as well as your workshops I went to on it. through a psychotherapy meeting just the other week, and I think Paul there was saying some very similar things. And one of the things that struck me with, he said the work in the room is sometimes helping them to build a new narrative about things, because there's been so much labeling and being made to feel indeficient and feel wrong. You know, and acknowledging the superpowers that come along with different ways of thinking as well. Yeah, it's really, really valuable learning and insight. Thank you.
Thank you, Vaughan. Yes, creating a new narrative. That's, you know, when we think about trauma and neurodivergence, everyone who has experienced, who has a neurodivergence has experienced trauma. Every single one. Okay, 64% of what they would call neurotypical adults state they have at least one adverse childhood experience, but actually 1 in 6 report having 4 or more. That's an average person on the street. Now, someone with neurodivergence will have much more than this. Much more than this. I saw one study, was one estimate, and this was focusing on ADHD, that by the time a child is 10 years old, they will have experienced 20,000 put-downs and negative messages. 20,000. This include persistent shaming. Why can't you be better? Look at everyone else. Persistent insults. Humiliation, both by adults and by children. Bullying by adults and children. Exclusion by adults, children, family members. Society. The results of being over-controlled as well. Someone who becomes incredibly compliant. Think about codependency. Codependency is a natural byproduct, I believe, of living in a world with a brain variation that comes under neurodivergence. And normalized threatening behavior, being raised in families where addiction exists. I think I talked about one study, it may have been in this workshop, but I talked about one study whereby there was a study of people with children with ADHD having come from families where their mother was an alcoholic. But what they didn't do in this study was check and test the mother. Was she actually undiagnosed with an ADHD, ASD, or neurodivergent condition that meant that parenting was overwhelming? That actually perhaps the way that they had survived or been taught to survive was through self-medicating in one way or another. So how on earth was there going to be some kind of grounded parenting? And it was also chaotic. And so, you know, these studies can be very short focused and not looking at the bigger, the wider picture of the inheritability of these conditions, not the hereditary nature of them, because that's different. That kind of sets us up for it will happen. These are inheritability. So there is, again, this intersection of what could happen. So, yes. So thank you, Vaughan. That's really, really great. Actually, when we're talking about creating a new narrative, you know, whether we're working with trauma and neurodivergence, if neurodivergence is in the room already, if you know that it is, or whether you don't know it is, or the client is just coming because they just need to, you know, feel like they want to be better. Oh, bless them. You know, really what we're looking at is the main goal with this work is how to learn to self-regulate, to be in relationship with a way of self-regulating that brings us home to ourselves. It is that quest for self, as I talk about. And if we think about neurodivergence, that I've heard it described as it's a self-disintegration, and I'm like, oh, disintegrated, and I really don't like that phrase. And the reason I don't like it is because if you're talking with someone who is very literal, that can feel very hopeless. Can feel really hopeless. Disintegration says it's never coming back. I much prefer we're on a quest for self, and as we get to know each element of our personalities, each element, each part of the personality of the person that has helped them to survive, we can bring those parts home. We can engage them in a different kind of work, and it is around, bringing us back to wholeness, bringing the client back to helping them. And it's not about helping them. I might bring that in a moment. It's about us not doing any harm. Piero Ferrucci, he tells this story, and he says there's this little monkey who's kind of walking through the jungle, and he goes and he sits on this kind of riverside, and he's on a rock, and he's like looking in. He had a little drink, and then he sees this fish, and this fish is like flapping about in this water, and he's like, oh, I must help the fish. And so he grabs the fish, and the fish comes out. He's like, it's okay, I will save you. And he puts the fish on the rock, and the fish is flapping about, and he's like, oh, and slowly the fish gets calmer and stops moving. And the monkey goes, I'm so glad I helped. You're okay now. And as therapists, I like that story a lot. You can probably tell. As therapists, we can be in the room thinking we're helping. And it's much more important to work out and to learn from the client how to do no harm.
I love what you said in your resources about tangents. Go with the client. Don't ground the client. Ground yourself. Allow yourself. Give yourself over to what appears as tangents. And these tangents are pathways home, right? And all we've got to do is accompany. And my experience is whacked out as some of these so-called tangential things are. They're the most glorious arcs where a person needs to go, and how they find themselves.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely, Kim. Absolutely. And yet, and at the same time, it's both and, because the tangents are brilliant. Anyone who's ever worked with a neurodivergent person will know that while you may think it's a tangent, they know exactly where they are.
Yes.
They know. And so, holding that space, maybe, sometimes they may project out on and transfer onto us that quality of self that they're not able to connect with, that can hold enough. So say, for example, you've got the hour or the 50 minutes, and you may want to allow them to go off on a tangent to go where they like, but knowing that actually how to bring yourself in to go, tell me about this story. Well, how is it relating, and what do you need? Not in a way of shaming and saying I'm getting lost here, but saying I can feel there's something really important that you're saying to me, and I don't want to get lost with it. And I'm aware that where are we? Bring me with you. I often talk about with a client that if we're walking side by side, and sometimes if I get tangled in the mess, could they just pause for a minute and help me to catch up? Again, what you're actually doing is asking them to disidentify. You're asking them to come into relationship in a way that isn't shaming. It's also saying, I am learning in this place as a client too. Humility is so, so important in our work. And we get it from falling over. you know, from coming down to earth. The word humus, yes, is to fall to earth. So when we're messing up, we're also building a container. Hey, Dale, come on in.
No, I'm not. It's. I have a question. We don't know that it's coming, but I just like to ask more about the intersectionality, or you've mentioned 2 diagnoses, ADHD and PTSD. You're saying there's 100% correlation of ADHD with trauma. Help me with the differential diagnosing, assessing and diagnosing those 2 particular areas.
Great question. Part 1. So this is a bit of a trap that we can fall into. I believe that our role isn't to assess and diagnose, it's to hold space for. And it's in attuning and discerning how to bring ourselves in a way that is an intervention that can hold both. But the other element to this is that you will see things that will come up in this space that will give you a clue that maybe there's a neurodivergence as well as trauma. With ADHD, for example, emotional outbursts or kind of that experience of high emotion can look like we're reenacting from trauma. The difference is that with ADHD, it's very short-lived and tends to be, it does tend to be short-lived. It doesn't tend to hang there. It doesn't tend to stay there like it can do with trauma of a reenacting and a kind of an emotional flashback of traumatic wounding. Also, so one of my clients that I worked with for a number of years, he actually came to me for health anxiety and had a significant trauma in his life. His parents divorced when he was very, very young, one years old, and he was consistently passed backwards and forwards. And came to me originally for health anxiety, which we worked through and did some incredible work around this. He went off, but always in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I think there's something else going on here, because he told me about his schooling. Now with an ADHD assessment and diagnosis, in order to be above the clinical threshold for diagnosis of ADHD, there are 18 markers, and you need to have, I think it's 5 at the moment, but they have got to have been going for longer than 6 months, and they have got to have been present in childhood, unless there has been a brain injury, unless there has been brain injury as a result of a traumatic kind of accident or actually illness can also bring that on. So when we're looking at the assessment criteria, it's really, was it present in this childhood time as well? And does it have significant impacts and impairments to a person's life? That's just with ADHD. With autism, it's slightly different, because it's really difficult to do the diagnostic criteria, because you really have to know what you're talking about, know what to be looking for. With ASD, there's no blood tests, there's no brain scans. There's no blood tests and brain scans with ADHD, but we're a little bit closer to seeing the brain variations. And so really, it's not our job to assess and diagnose and to work out which is which. I think we can get caught in that, actually, and that can take us away from our clients of actually being with the being in the room.
Sometimes we're required to do a professional assessment, which includes diagnosis. That was my...
So that would be in maybe it's different in New Zealand. Our psychotherapists and counsellors qualified to assess and diagnose. They're not in the UK. That would be a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist can assess, diagnose, and prescribe medication. A psychologist, some psychologists can assess and diagnose, but not prescribe. I work a lot in partnership with psychiatrists and also with people. Say, for example, you'll get potentially three different types of clients that come in. one that may have already been diagnosed and is dealing with the fallout. They will know a lot more about the condition than you may. And so it's a great learning experience. The ones that don't know that they have the condition and are wondering about it, they may want some support around that diagnostic journey, which can be really difficult. I always say we don't need to have a diagnosis in order to work with neurodivergence. There's a lot of attunement that can happen as we learn how to create a space, a holding and facilitating environment for this work. If we're working with the diagnostic journey, Dale, I'm happy to kind of give you some resources around that, and around seeing the differences and similarities. There's lots of papers, I think I put them in the resources already, lots of papers around the slight differences in PTSD as opposed to a neurodivergence.
Thank you. I've not got on there, but I will now. Thank you. That's
okay. Maybe that's a whole session in itself. I would actually say that's a whole session in itself. I mean, there's a lot of work we can do there, and I wouldn't want to I think we're just touching the surface. Yeah, but thank you so much for bringing it in. It's great, really helpful. The other person who might come into, I said 3, didn't I? So one who's been diagnosed, one who is wondering about an assessment, and one who has no idea whatsoever that something might be going on. My particular client, Ben, who came in, not his real name, who came in for health anxiety, returned about a year after we finished work, because he and his wife were trying for a baby, and he just could not lose weight, and he couldn't stick to routines, and he was really struggling. And then it was the time to start to wonder about, okay, shall we look at the other thing that might be in the room? And it's always risky kind of bringing in, have you thought that there might be a neurodivergence? There may be, how your brain works. There's a variation. And it took a long time to talk about it. It's very rare that I'll bring that into clients early on. Very, very, I don't think I've ever done it, because otherwise we'd fall victim to confirmation bias, which is where we kind of think we know what we know, and then that stops us from really seeing the being in front of us. We can also fall victim to reductionism. Anyone who's familiar with Gabor Mate will also know perhaps that there's a huge backlash around Gabor Mate's work as being reductionist, saying that trauma causes ADHD in particular. That is seen as reductionism because it just isn't, we just don't know enough. We don't know enough to be able to say that psychological trauma causes ADHD. It will make it worse, but it will have already been there. And every bit of the science that we see, all of the research documents at the moment are really showing that actually it's much deeper than that. It's not about ADHD causing trauma. And so that's worth noting. I also believe that we just don't have enough research. We're not able to go back to the beginning of time to really understand epigenetics and how brain variations are caused because we have to survive in the world. And I would love to see it if we could just go back 300 years. That would be incredible, but we can't yet. And hopefully in the future we'll be able to see, get more of a wider view on what Gabor Mate brings into this space. I actually think I quite like a lot of his work, so I think we're in danger of dismissing it as a whole. It's important not to do that again. Take what we like and leave the rest, and hold space for the not yet known. So as it happens, that particular client, Ben, he is, we did a lot of work around around creating enough of a structure for him to begin the process of deciding what he wanted. Does he want an assessment? And then I'm able to talk to him about that process and support him in that. And he's actually going for an assessment as well. But in the meantime, he started off training his will with 1 glass of water a day in the morning. Have I talked about this already in this session? I'm not sure if I did. But so this is a person who's never been able to read a book, who was excluded in school because he was naughty and had to sit outside. He doesn't know how he passed any of his exams. Some of his exams he never even took. He's successful, but he's also really chaotic in some areas of his life. This is the other thing about ADHD and trauma, and also ASD or ADHD and trauma, is that these conditions continue. Unlike trauma, these conditions continue while you're even asleep. They are non-situational. There'll be elements everywhere that show up. I'm talking about neurodivergence, whereas in trauma, there'll be some elements where it's fine and other elements where it's really activated. And feel free to disagree with me on this one, but I do this area very, very well. So, and I'm also really interested in your experience of that too. So he started off, he made a decision. He wanted to start small with one thing. And so he decided he wanted to have a glass of water at the moment that he woke up in the morning, pint of water. So we had to go through the process of, how do you like your water? How are you going to get it to your bed? So he started off with getting a glass of water at night after he'd cleaned his teeth. He would go down, get a glass of water, put it by his bed with a piece of paper on the top so it didn't get dusty. And then he'd wake up in the morning at 6, have his glass of water, and then start his day. And throughout the day, he would also message me. I would not normally do this with a client, but it was part of this grounding. It was almost like I was there with him in the room, that he would message me with an emoji, a water emoji, and each day it was a different emoji, and I would just come back with a thumbs up. We had a contract that I wouldn't text him, he wouldn't text me. It was all done through a tick exercise that, yes, he'd had his water. And that carried on for 45 days and has come to an end naturally when he went on holiday. And he said, oh, I didn't do all the things I wanted to do. And I said, how's the water? He said, oh no, I had more water. So, and this is now months down the line, and his water is a huge part of his experience. But also it's this, Asa Jolie talks about, we only need a morsel, and only need a morsel of will, and will breeds will. Will grows will. We only need a tiny bit. When Kim brought in this element about about this kind of swinging from one experience to another, one reaction to another, we only need a tiny bit of a pause in order to build more of a pause. And some of our work with our clients will be about how to find that pause. There's power in it. Power in the pause. I feel like I've gone off on a tangent, but how are we doing? Steph.
Karen, hi. I've just got a question around supplements. So we've talked about medication, and I see a lot of young people who have ADHD, possibly even ASD, and a number of them are not diagnosed, and it's quite expensive to get the diagnosis, and a number of them just can't afford it. Their families can't afford it. And I've been trying to do my own research around, I know that there's things like foods that can actually, help reduce some of the symptoms, and there's possibly also supplements. There's a lot written around vitamin D. There's also a amino acid on the market called L-theanine. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. Have you seen or heard any more research around that amino acid and how effective it is for people with ADHD and focus issues?
That one in particular is with all supplements, it's very individual, the experience. Anecdotally, I've heard a mixed bag. Some people have found real help with that particular one. In terms of, so I've listed in the resources also quite a long list of natural supplements. There's also a book about oh, now I found it. It's called Finally Focused, and that's, I'm just doing off the top of my head. It's called Finally Focused, and it's quite an old book actually on natural remedies, working with neurodivergence, with ADHD actually, with natural supplements. One thing, so things like lion's mane can be very helpful. That's for focus. Ashwagandha for calm. And your vitamin D, as you say, is really important. All of the B complex, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. Basically, that can turn into a very slippery slope and very expensive in itself, and become kind of very rigid. So I love the idea of trying everything as a science project, in terms of try something for a month and see how it goes. Also working with the hormone fluctuations, you have to think about that. As a general rule, when I'm working with someone to start with, I say one thing that you can do is try to have protein with every meal. Protein with every meal. Start the day with protein, whether it's an egg or a cheese or cottage cheese or whatever it may. Try to include protein in every single meal or a snack. It actually has quite a lot of proven research around the benefits of increasing protein in your diet.
So and how about reduction of sugar and carbs?
Yeah, that's naturally, absolutely. But at the same time, sometimes that if someone, say for example, is recovering from substance abuse, they may replace substances with sugar. It's very common. And so to take away that, first of all, without understanding how it helps, is diminishing that person's way of being able to survive in the world.
And I think sometimes it's too much for them as well. It's like, you're asking someone to take on these new vitamins and then cutting out, carbs and sugar, and having to increase protein. It's almost like overwhelming. So
yeah, exactly. And then of course we end up getting caught in the transference as well of wanting to help rather than, and who's it really for. So getting to know what they eat and how they eat and why they eat, and will give you a really good view of how they take care of themselves in this world. So my goodness, time is marching on. There's a couple of, no, Steph, it's great to hear you. Thank you so much. How are we in this space? Have we lost Mark, did we? Along the way? Can't see him.
He went a wee while ago.
Okay. So, right, I'm just going to do, how are we doing? How's everyone doing? You must be exhausted. It's been a long old day for everyone, right? Yeah. They've only got a couple of minutes left before we start to bring things to a close. Can you believe it, Dale? Yeah. So, and I'm aware that, so I'm just going to go through a couple of things, just a kind of a quick fire round of some things that can help you to really create the space. So, yeah, there's just not enough time. So, Kim said last time, neurodivergent people need connection with people who understand just how hard it is for them to connect. They need connection. Yeah, we know that therapy works with neurodivergence really well. even because the idea of body doubling, of being in the room with a someone, will help. Okay, when we're talking about healing, we're not talking about healing of the condition, we're talking about healing of the separation from themselves, of the pain and the shame, the loss and the grief, missed opportunities, lost potential. It's about, you know, being with the heartbreak. You know, our work is a work of working with broken hearts and helping to find out and finding out how this person first got their heart broken will help us to be in the room, will help turn their attention to how they can come into relationship with themselves, changing that story, as Vaughan said. Yeah, so going beyond face value, as I say, you know, I love the playful spirit of Assagioli because he's just so curious. He was so curious. And really bringing that energy into the room when we're working with neurodivergence is really important. It's okay if someone is deadpan and says that they haven't got emotions, because if we think about interoception, anyone heard of it? Assagioli talked about interoception. Interoception is being able to tune in to the internal states, a person's internal state. With neurodivergence, that is seriously blocked, seriously impaired. So actually working really well to find emotions, to find physical experience of themselves. It won't be in the way that we expect it to. They won't be able to name emotions. Maybe they will. Maybe we will. But it's not a failure if not. Yeah, and just be willing to enter their world, find out about their special interests. Because it's amazing how you can connect with someone. I mean, in therapeutic work, I'm sure you've done it, who hasn't, you know, talked in Harry Potter language or whatever it's on TV, or, you know, Greek mythology, whatever it may be. It's a way of also helping them, well, helping you to hear self in the room, to bring analogies in, to work creatively. Well, there's just too much to share. Yeah, I think I'm just going to bring it to a close actually now, but I'll send out more resources if you'd like. I'm very happy to come again if there's a particular aspect of Assagioli's models that you'd like us to unpack with a neurodivergent view and framework. That would be amazing. So, but it's been wonderful to be with you this evening, and really appreciate it. I know everyone's tired. I'm all engaged. I'm all ready to go. So, but I'm going to bring this to a close and just say this work is a work of unfolding, and when we sit back and allow self to come into the space, the transpersonal self, that is so much more in charge of this work than you or I or the client. When we sit back, when we hear that voice of self, to be able to sit back and allow our clients to find relationship with it in their own way is just, I mean, it's beyond a privilege. So, and I hope for the same for you too. So thank you for allowing me to be here this evening.
Well, Karen, I guess that's where I step in. On behalf of Panza and your Antipodean Psychosynthesis family, I extend our heartfelt gratitude for your generous gift of your time and your knowledge. Your teachings over the past 2 months have been deeply insightful and personally meaningful, and I'm certain that they have also been of equal value to everyone that has attended and watched the videos. I'm thrilled to hear that you would like to come back, because I was sincerely hoping that you would consider maintaining a connection with us in the future. And wishing you and your loved ones and everyone here a joyful and restorative Easter. So thank you all that's here, and Karen, thank you so much.
Thank you, Leanne. Lovely to have that. Thank you so much. I wonder, as I haven't had a chance to hear everyone since the beginning, I wonder as people check out, would you just, bring in a word or a way? Is that allowed? I know that we're kind of at time, but is that okay with the powers that be?
Yes, I'll start with the word grateful. Thank you very much, Karen.
Thanks, Dale.
Yeah, I would use inspired, actually. Very inspired.
Thank you, Toria.
I feel enlightened to see the connection between the kinds of materials that I was reading about and people I know, and to have that put into a psychosynthesis framework. This is fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Meg.
Loving how you bring a Saggioli into the room. It's great to have them.
I feel the same way. Thanks, Loretta.
Appreciative, Karen. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Vaughan.
Thank you so much, Karen. And I'm looking forward to maybe connecting with you at a later date as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Steph.
Thanks, Karen. I really enjoyed. There were a few aha moments with clients I've seen today. In fact, it's like the thing about interoception. Aha, right. And yeah, like others have said, I really love the way you brought in the psychosynthesis way of thinking. We're exposed so much to so much general psychology, but it's really good to have psychosynthesis in the frame. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I feel really inspired by your sharing and your practice. I last time we had the breakouts, I was talking to my colleague. I said, for the first time, I wanted to become a full-time counselor. It's just because I so want to enjoy more or practice more of psychosynthesis framework. It's all because the inspiration from you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, aren't we blessed? Yeah, it's great work. Leah.
Yeah, so I'm feeling very grateful, and what I'm taking away is just really just holding that space, with the client room.
Yeah. Thank you.
Inspired work as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Jerry. And I know that Jean sent a little message as well. Thank you, Jean. I do, when we're talking about interoception, I do a larger piece of work I can do around that. So I'm very happy to, if you want to message me, I can talk you through that model that I use. It can be used really early on in the work as a way of helping to connect with the body. And it's, it always is quite inspiring. So great. Thank you, everybody. It's been an absolute joy. And I hope the storm is not too raging and the calm is to be found where you are.